Son sunumu Mehmet Polatel yapıyor.
Our final presentation will be delivered by Mehmet Polatel. He graduated his license degree in the Middle East Technical University, and then he completed his graduate degree in Koç University History and Genocide and History on History and Genocide in this position. He is going. I will be talking about two works that he was included in. One of them was prepared with Uğur Ümit Üngör, that was prepared by Continuum Publishers. There is another work that was titled "The Seized Properties of Armenian Foundations." It was published in 2012 by Hrant Dink Foundation, which was prepared together with Nora Midanoğlu, Özgür Eren, and Mehmet Atilgan. He serves as a researcher in Koç University in the history department, and he's continuing his PhD work. Today he will be talking about the demographic and socioeconomic outcomes of Hamidian massacres in Van. First of all, I will be focusing on the process that started in 1890 and continued until 1900s. I will be talking about the transformation of the demographic structure and socioeconomic life in one region, and the violence and plunder economy that reigned. I will also be talking about the transformation of the central government's policy towards Armenian, especially after 1878, after the Berlin Congress. The central authority followed a policy that aimed at decreasing the Armenian population and fortifying the Muslim factors. This is not only based on a reasoning that would necessitate massacres, but it is also based on some direct orders from the central government. So, the Sadrazam Kamil Pasha sent an order in order for the Muslim population to be increased in 1889, and in 1894 he sent another order saying that the first order was not realized, and he said that in Erzurum, Van, and Hakkari there would be some Muslim refugees that would be installed in these provinces coming from Caucasus, and in this way the Muslim population would be increased. Another example for this is as follows. There was another administrative order to reorganize the Armenian population and to decrease the population in Van and Hakkari. So we need to take this into consideration within the framework of the demographic transformation and transfer of property in the area. We can discuss how this social economic transformation was imposed to the people there. I will be talking about that as well. In the beginning of 1890s, there was a mass violence act in Van. Many Armenians lost their lives. Many of them were forced to migrate. This was quite important in terms of the transformation of the demographic structure in Van. It is quite impossible to know the statistics regarding Armenian migration in Van, but according to archives in 1896 there were 2,000 Armenians that went from Van to Tiari Mountains. We are not talking about a sort of migration that was limited within the borders of the Ottoman Empire. There was also migration to Russia, America, and Iran. There were 40,000 Armenians that went to Russia, and we know that there were in total 10,000 Armenians that migrated to these regions that I mentioned. In the second half of 1890s, the central government wanted to make this population movement permanent, and they wanted to keep Armenians from coming back. There were certain initiatives for that purpose. One of the most striking developments was the agreement between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Russia said guaranteed that they wouldn't send the Armenians that came to Russia, they wouldn't send them back to the Ottomans. And as a result of this agreement, there was a proposal to change the Russia and Ottoman population in Russia in Ottoman, to replace them, but this was denied by Russia. So the eastern provinces, and specifically Van, went through a process of transformation, and we need to take into consideration the role of the central government in this process as well. I'm going to tackle 5 topics with regard to socioeconomic transformation. The first one is to transfer the property of the lands in the area to the few Muslim landowners there. So the property of the Armenian people were taken away from them. There was the commission, the Seized Property Commission, and there are detailed information. There's detailed information from the archives of that commission. There are certain reports that mention the property transfer. So the public property and the plundering of the Armenian property. So in total there are over 7,000 seized property that were recorded in these reports. But as they include certain valuable assets, it was quite criticized. Kahan Dargarabedyan was also included in this commission, and he published a separate book on this issue, saying that these reports do not quite cover the whole issue. You can see the breakdown of the lands that are over 100 hectares, but you only see the agricultural areas here. There are certain pastures, farms, and other wine farms here, and they're all included here. When we take a look at other data from Van, we can see that there were other property transfer for the smaller farms as well, and they are in general have certain local authority, have some local authority. The tribes that have relations with the Hamidian troop, they had their shares as well. Hüseyin Pasha from Haydaran, Emin Pasha from Haydaran tribe as well, his wife. These are the important figures that received their share. And Sheikh Hamid is one of the people who had religious authority, and Bedrullah's grandson is also one of them. These are some names that come up at those reports and British documents. So Van was an important center in terms of the having a massive impact. But these reports are based on villages and the number of plundering that affected whole villages. Van Başkale and Pisköy, and it is nowadays called Yurttepe Köy, is one of these examples. In 1896, the whole land was taken by force by Mullah Muhammad and his children. In the reports, it is underlined that the villagers had certain land titles as well. One of the most important results of this is evacuation of Van from small and medium Armenian villages. Some of these villages wrote petitions for the central and local authorities, and they tried to get their lands back. There was a reform commission that was built, and the governorates, they made certain decisions, but they couldn't get concrete results. It did not only change the land and property structure, but it also changed the labor relations as well. They had to leave their land, and they had to continue a life of serfdom. So there was the transfer of agricultural products. One of the most important factors that caused the erosion of small and medium villages in Van is that this phenomenon continued until 1890s, and the Armenian villagers that were ripped out of their property, they could not process their land, and nobody seized, even if nobody seized and settled in their land. In 1907, Dixon from the British consulate went to the region and prepared a large report, and according to the report, by the way, I have the relative part of the report here, Dixon says in this report that the governor of Van wanted to increase the tax income, and he wanted for the Armenians to come back to their land, but Armenians had some security worries, so instead of going back to their land, they preferred working as slaves. So according to Dixon, the reason is that the Armenians knew that they would be the target of the mass violence acts in Van. Therefore, in Van, the mass violence environment in Van was not only limited between 1894 and 1897, but it continued for a longer period of time. The agricultural production was controlled by the Muslim power owners for a long time, and it was not only because of the property transfer. This power owners also applied pressure to the Kurdish population here. So they used their power in order to control the agricultural production of Kurdish villagers. In Van Patnos, there's this village that is called Zomik, and in that village, the Kurdish people from the Hırdavanlı tribe demanded the sovereignty of Hüseyin Pasha, Hırdavanlı Hüseyin Pasha, and in return they offered as gift some pieces of land to Hüseyin Pasha. He is at the same time the Kaymakam of Patnos, and he stopped these people from making production, from cultivating crops, and there is a lawsuit afterwards, which was not solved in the constitutional period either, and Hüseyin Pasha continued to control the whole agricultural production and to banish those who resisted his authority. Another important factor in terms of the transformation of the socio-economic life in Van is the monopoly of animal breeding in Van. At the end of 1880s, the number of the animals that were exported from Van was 30,000, but in 1890s this number went up to over 100,000. Here there are certain animals such as goats, lambs. So the increase was about 100,000, and the reason behind this was that the power owners such as Hüseyin Pasha used their land as pastures. So it was not only the control owners that changed, but the purpose power owners became quite dominant in this area. Unlike the provinces such as Bitlis, Mamuretolis, and Erzurum, the trade trends in Van was not very much affected in 1890s from the mass violence activities and plunder economy of that time. This was prepared according to the British reports. As you can see, there is a huge decrease between 94 and 97, and then we see another increase that took place. So the increase in the animal production played an important role here. In terms of exports, there was a drought that happened around 1890s. So this should not overshadow the advances in terms of trade in the region.
According to the British reports, it was said that the purchasing power of the people dropped, and in terms of the new imported products, there was a decline in demand. Another important development is that the Armenian vendors have closed down their shops after the year 1895. So in terms of agrarian production, the mass violence has very much influenced the way land was being used. And of course, this has also influenced agricultural production. And what has happened in Van should be evaluated from this perspective. Hüseyin Pasha and the other Muslim power holders did some hoarding in order to make more profit and have manipulated the grain market, which caused the famine in Van. So the final point I'd like to talk about is the socioeconomic transformation that took place in the region and how this has caused a conflict between the central government and the local powers. We know that in 1898 there was a telegram that the Van governor sent to the center and saying that in the unfarmed land that belongs to the Armenians, no migrants were settled in this land. And in this same telegram, the governor again says that an official third-person transfer of this land has not taken place. So at the beginning of the 1900s, how to share the confiscated land of Armenians, or the left land that used to belong to Armenians, this caused a conflict between the Ottoman authorities and between the local powers. And according to the complaint petition sent to the center by the Fourth Army, the reason for this chaos environment was because the title deed authority was not properly conducting its duty. And Van gave a reply to this complaint petition, and this reply shows to what extent the plunders were taking place and how things had gotten out of hand. And people were starting to confiscate the land that used to belong to Armenians, the ones from the Hamidiye alayları, and they started acting as if this was their land, and they saw it all right to just grab someone's land and not give it back. So it's obvious that in this region from 1890 to 1908 there was a plunder economy in place, which has changed the structure and the texture of the region. And then after the 1908 period, this has influenced the participation of local politics and mass violence, and these issues are all worth thinking upon. Thank you.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz.